You've heard of TED Talks and TikToks. This week, we're going to have a tech talk where we break down some of the terms you've probably heard from your agency or someone managing your website for you. So you can bookmark this episode, save it, and we'll have some great analogies on understanding exactly what all these technical terms mean. I'm one of your hosts, Devin Hayes.
And I'm Amanda Joyce.
Let's get into it. Welcome to Trade Secrets, where we demystify digital marketing to help contractors get the most bang for their marketing bucks.
This is for you if you're a contractor looking for actionable marketing insights.
Learn from home services industry experts to elevate your business through simplified marketing strategies.
Let's dive into today's trade secret. All right. So this topic might not be the most exciting one that's ever hopped out at you in your downloads, but this is a really good one to spend a little bit of time and try to digest this a little bit. We hear from contractors all the time, whether they're moving their website over onto our server or whatever it may be, and we start asking them questions about their host or their DNS, and the look of fear or like a deer in headlights on their face is comical at times, but also so relatable for all of us because we've all been here. So we're going to walk through some of this really common jargon that you probably hear your agency using or your technical support team, and help you just digest it a little bit. So without further ado, this is really Devin's domain, so I'm going to really let you dive in and start talking about
there. Domain.
Yeah. So take it away.
All right, so we're just going to go through some of these phrases. I'll jump right in. Hosting or host, that's one of them we hear every day. So this is where your website lives. So I kind of wrote down some analogies here that would make it easier to understand. So imagine renting a space in like a huge shopping mall, and you set up your store. Hosting is like that store for you. So the server would be the big building that it lives in, and then your storefront would be your website specifically. So that's kind of an easier way to picture like what hosting is, or what your host is. I guess you can almost get really granular here and break out the difference between hosting and a host. Depending on who it is, they can be synonymous, but not all malls are created the same. So you've got malls where they've got maybe like a great janitorial service that are going to clean up the halls to where you get into your mall. They've got great separation between, storefronts, or not too many, I don't know, of the same store right next to each other, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's a terrible example. But in any case, hosting is a service as well. You can have your website sitting on a host, but if they're not providing a service in addition to having your website sitting there, that doesn't mean that your website is getting updated every month. It doesn't mean your plugins are getting updated, that your theme is getting updated, that your security is being updated. So host and hosting should be thought of a bit differently. And when you have your website hosted somewhere, it's great to ask the question like, is what monthly services go along with this monthly fee or annual fee? Like, are you taking care of my site, or do I need to have a separate management fee? So that's kind of the first piece of it. And then the second piece that we talk to our clients about falls under hosting is the phrase server. And again, if you think of the mall is the server itself, right? Or host, but then you can break that out a bit further. You can have private hosting or shared hosting. So that analogy is more like an apartment building would be shared hosting, where there's lots of websites or lots of rooms in one building or on one server. And then a private server is just like a private residence. It's just your house, or if you know who owns that server, you know everyone else on your block. So private servers are really nice for websites that are a bit bigger. You just get a better site performance. They're faster, and you know who your neighbors are. When you are on a shared host, the bandwidth that those other websites soak up, like say if you're on the same server as like an e-commerce site and you're a home services site, their traffic and it's just, they have a lot more traffic through to their site. That usage is a lot different than a service-based company's website. So it's good to know who your neighbors are. But when you're
Yeah.
first starting up, and you don't want to pay that heavy hosting fee for a private server, then there's a space for shared servers. But all of us in the SEO world, we're like, if you're investing in SEO, and especially with our agency, we definitely want you on a private server, because all of our efforts will be for naught if your site performance is bad. And we're going to blame your host, and they're going to blame us and blame the website optimization, and we're just going to point the finger at each other, and you're going to be stuck in the middle going, I don't care whose problem it is, but somebody fix it, because as we've told you, performance on a website is massively important for your ranking on Google. So
Yeah, and I would say too, we can all relate to that analogy as well. Like, think about the days of COVID when all of us were suddenly at home working, and everyone in the neighborhood's internet was going slower because we were all there trying to like work off of that same bandwidth. It's the same thing with a shared server. We've all felt it in our day to day usage of of the web, and if you don't want to deliver a bad user experience by a website that's going to load so slow that a potential customer is going to be so annoyed that your gallery is loading so slow they're going to click out and go fill out a form for the next guy. This this can't be more critical.
absolutely. So the next one kind of on our list here is DNS, or domain name server. So a lot of times this is in the same place as where you purchase your domain. But we have been running into it more and more frequently where it is not, and your DNS lives somewhere separate from your domain and separate from your host. So that's like a different login. And that piece of the pie is important. It's kind of a translator for, I don't know, code. Like it takes an IP address, those numbers, and it turns it into the words like elevmarketing.com is our URL. So the DNS takes like 47.192.324.21 and tells web crawlers to point it to elevmarketing.com, for example. But that's just one piece of it. Your email records are in here. Sometimes like your site verification records for like Google Search Console, things like that, live in your DNS. And oftentimes this comes up or is important when you're moving your host. You have to change your either A record or CNAME record, but it's done through your DNS. And when you do a DNS shift with a host shift, then you also need to update your email records or your email stops working. So that's a very simplified explanation of DNS, but it's important to know where this is. So as we're kind of going through these, we've started to create just a sheet that tells our clients where their hosting is, how to access it, where their DNS is, and how to access that. Because these are all things like we don't expect you to know and memorize, but it's really good to know where they are and have them in one place if you don't already. Okay, what else? Oh my gosh. Okay, the domain, we say domain. Sometimes you interchange like domain and URL, but they're actually different. Domain is the root of any website. So ours is elevmarketing.com for our agency. That is the domain, but then a URL could be elevmarketing.com/SEO-services. That would be a full like URL to our SEO page. So that's the difference between a domain and a URL. What else? Let's see here. Oh, a CDN. So a CDN is a content delivery network. And this is important for site performance, enhancing your speed. The analogy, I love this one, is like thinking of it as like a chain of convenience stores spread throughout the US, or I guess anywhere. And each of those convenience stores makes a copy of your website so that no matter where you're accessing your website from, it will pick up a copy of your website from like that closest convenience store instead of where the actual server lives. So little tiny copies living at these convenience stores helps your website pull up faster for the user, which is better UX, which and also helps with your positioning, because again, site performance is one of the number one ranking factors or most important ranking factors in search engine optimization. So that's a CDN. Does that make sense to you?
I think so.
Did I get it?
And this kind of a lot of times when you're talking about this stuff, my eyes kind of glaze over, and I'm just so glad it's not my lane to swim in. So this is excuse the question, but with the CDN, do you need to access it separately than you would from your host or from your DNS records and things? Like, would someone listening need to know how to access their CDN separately than they would their DNS?
It depends on your host. So if you're hosted with like WordPress engine, for example, they already have a collaboration with a CDN. That one is Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a CDN, and they have a whole bunch of other services, but that could be a separate login for the client if it wasn't already included in their hosting. So if you were with like SiteGround hosting, you would have a separate login with your CDN. Cloudflare, I think, is like one of the most common, most popular ones, but sometimes if you don't know who your host is, you can type in like who is my host, and there's a bunch of different free tools that will let you plop that in and tell you, and it'll come up as Cloudflare. You're like, well, Cloudflare, can they be my host? Well, your name servers are pointed at Cloudflare, so that's how that sometimes like comes up showing as a host, but really it's just that your name servers are pointed to that CDN. Is that enough acronyms? Did we cover them all in there? Oh my gosh. Everyone's glazing over. This is like
this is why
this
yeah.
tech talk.
But
tech talk.
Tech talk. But I do think it's really important to point out how these can all be confusing and why, but they are all critical. And I just know that sometimes we've been in those phases where maybe we're moving someone onto our server, and then suddenly it's like all hands on deck trying to track down all of this information, and the poor client is like, I don't know, like I used a different, they just depended on whoever built their website or was their former agency. So it's very uncommon to not know where all these things live, but it's just kind of understanding that it's critical to have access to them. Like, this can just be a really good thing to just reduce stress down the road if suddenly you're making a switch and you want to make sure your email doesn't turn off or your website doesn't go down, or if it does, who's your host and how to get a hold of them. So I think it's really important, even though it's all kind of confusing.
It's all overwhelming. If you take nothing else away from today, just take away that you should have access to your host, because if your website goes down and you can't get a hold of them for some reason, if you have admin access, that host either has a support team that can help you get the site back up, or you can get access to your backups to get your website back up if for some reason you can't get a hold of your website manager. So if you take nothing else away, know that your hosting is where you would restore your website if it goes down and pull up a backup. And you don't have to do it. They have support people at most every host that will do it for you. You just have to know where it is and that you have administrative access to it in order to make that happen. So if you take nothing else away from our tech talk, I feel like I'm from the Valley every time I say it. Just take that away from it. Next on our list, we have WordPress, and this is just what I don't know. What do you think? Like 90% of our clients on here, we've got.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I would say like 99. We've got someone on Octane, but we've required everyone to switch over to WordPress, like our preferred stack. That's another one we should cover. But our preferred set of technology on a website that our whole team is familiar with working in. We've got it's WordPress, but Octane is great. It's super fast, closed sourced, great. But WordPress is what we were defining, and that's just kind of like a framework for your website that makes you not have to know how to code something from scratch. Okay, now the realm that's a little bit less techy. We've talked about this before, some of the like common Google tools. But again, when we're asking for access with clients, when we're onboarding them, we try to make it as easy as possible. But there is a lot of historical data in some of these tools that we don't want to get rid of. So we don't like to just start over if we don't have to, because that is like your asset. That's your IP. And so you should have access to it, and you should be able to like have the continuity between agencies should you move over. So anyway, that's why we thought we'd touch on some of these tools, just because in these onboarding conversations, like we end up using these acronyms, and we want to punch ourselves in the face as much as you want to punch us in the face when you hear them. So we're very self-aware.
And we will, just so everybody knows, in the show notes, we'll have a list of everything that we've just defined, including the list of these tools we're about to go through. So if you are working with an agency, you could just take the bullets that we have shared below and reach out to your agency and say, hey, could you help me get access to all of these things? Might take them a minute to get back to you, but if you just have this living somewhere in a document, you will thank us later.
Yeah. Okay. First one, Google Tag Manager. You play
Yeah.
in this a little bit more than I, but I guess with GA4 now, I guess I'm in it just as
Yeah.
much.
I know. I was gonna say I almost feel like let's talk GA4 first because they are simpatico or they need each other to work now. But Google
Yeah.
Analytics 4 is the most recent version of Google Analytics that's been out for quite a long time. It provides data that allows you to understand how users are behaving on your website. It's a
How
free
they
Google
got
tool that
there. Yeah.
absolutely the
Sorry.
path they're taking on it. Oh no, you're good. How they're interacting with your content, if they're completing an action, where they're leaving. It really gives you a good idea of just how your user experience of your website and how it's performing. So this is one that's critical to have access to. You've probably had it on your website for years. Hopefully you already know how to log into it. If you don't, it's definitely important to get that access. It's also important to note that about a year ago, in July of 2023, they kind of forced all of us over to GA4. There was a previous version of Google Analytics called Universal Analytics that if you've had it running for years, it was living in two spots. But all that really matters now is that GA4 is the version that Google's forcing us all to use.
And as the years gone on, like we complained about it, we mourned the loss of UA, but now once you get more familiar with the tool, it really does give you quite a bit more information in a different format than UA did. So it's good, but it's not as easy to have like a really optimized setup of GA4. Like we have a straight like GA4 expert who helps us get everything set up because what Universal Analytics kind of like just inherently did, we need to set it up. For example, like page speed was something that it automatically just tracked for you on Universal Analytics. And now we have to do some custom setup for every GA4 account so that we can monitor timing through GA4, not just through like third party tools. So that's what GA4 is. And the way it's installed on your site is through GTM, which is Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager is it's a place for all of your tracking code to live. So Google Ads, Google Analytics 4, a Facebook pixel, I don't know, like any sort of tracking pixel lives inside your Google Tag Manager container. And that's so that you don't have to update your website every single time you want to implement a new piece of tracking code. And you don't have to slow it down. So your GTM will house all of those tracking codes, but your website only has to have one set of code on there. So it really is better for site performance, and it's nice because it's forced our hand to do it. So while you have the capability on your website to go ahead and put every single piece of tracking code in there, don't and why, you just put it in GTM. It's way easier, less risky, and better for site performance.
Absolutely. And it's one place to log in and check all of those tags in one spot. Used to, you'd email it over to somebody and they'd throw it in the head tag and you didn't know where things were all mixed up and crazy in there. It's just such a cleaner way to manage your tags. And most importantly, it improves site performance. Like for years, we would all like roll our eyes when somebody wanted to put a Facebook pixel on a website because we're like, oh, here we go. It's going to kill performance.
You're
So
like, are
now that
you
it
done
can
with this
just
yet? Can we turn this
yeah,
off now?
exactly. Exactly. Are you running ads? If not, can we please turn this off?
Yeah.
So it's really critical. And one other thing, previously in the old Google Analytics, you could go in and set up all your conversions, which is, like anytime someone hits the thank you page after filling out a form, let's call it let's count it as a contact, whatever it may be. You could create all that inside of the old Google Analytics. GA4, you have to make all of those events inside of Google Tag Manager and send them over. So again, to your point where they're kind of forcing our hand to use GTM, when they moved us over to GA4, they really forced our hand with GTM. And I think a lot of people that maybe were not excited about embracing that technology probably now are like, okay, I'm glad Google made me do that.
Mm-hmm. Most Google products, they try to make it really easy and really simple for you to use and implement, but some of them really aren't. And we're really thorough and like very familiar and with Google and their products and their tools, and most interfaces are intuitive, but like GA4 really isn't. And so as part of like our setup and our onboarding with new clients, we do this for you, but it is like, I mean, people charge for it. I mean, we know some other agencies that charge between like a $300 to $900 just to get your GA4 installed on your site and optimized properly with like the tracking and event tracking, conversion tracking that is effective and not wasteful. I think the out of the box GA4, it comes with like a few events that are just like, who's tracking? That's not, it doesn't mean anything to
Exactly.
anybody because it was based on it like a e-commerce sort of shopper versus a service based, I think,
That and
experience.
yeah, and I think it's the easiest like universal things like time on a page, things like that. But if you're going to stop and look at like your site performance, you don't really care about a lot of the generic ones that just come in the box. You're going to care about like who downloaded this form, who, or downloaded this PDF, who filled out this form, and you really do have to go in and GA4 is not going to automatically be able to recognize those actions. You're going to have to go in and define them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Another reason why you should call Elevation Marketing today for all your digital marketing needs. Just kidding. Not kidding. But all right. That was the show is sponsored by Elevation Marketing. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Okay, GSC Google Search Console. And again, this might seem redundant if you listen to our other episode, but we're I don't know how many minutes in, so that means like there's two people listening at this juncture.
Yeah.
Uh, we've got Google Search Console. This is how you're performing on Google itself before people get through to your website. What search queries do you appear for? What pages are the most important? And of those impressions, meaning how many times that page of your website was served, how many times was it clicked on, you can segment this data, funnel it, go date specific, look at date ranges, really get an idea for maybe how strong the copy is in your short little snippets that show up below the page title. Those are called meta descriptions. If you're not getting any clicks but lots of impressions, update it. But it's really great to see like what is Google liking you for? What are they trusting you for? What content are they favoring? How do you make more of that content? Are you how are you trending? Look for some seasonality, cyclical trends with your historical data year over year. It's just great to see what you're being trusted and favored for on Google itself before they get to your website. That's
Yeah.
GSC.
Well, the thing I always find so interesting is, if you were just looking at Google Analytics and trying to determine which of your blogs, for example, are performing the best, you would have a very limited idea because a lot of times we'll find really high impression counts. So Google's liking it, it's serving it. Maybe we're not getting a ton of clicks through to it, which to your point earlier, you can update your metas to ideally increase that click through rate. But sometimes it's just that continued brand awareness in the search results. If someone's doing their research and they keep seeing articles by you on the topic popping up, then they might eventually, take action elsewhere. But it gives you a good idea of, to your point, what Google likes. So you're not
Yeah.
just flying blind and just creating content and guessing at what Google's actually serving up.
Yeah, and this can be like I think this is one of the most powerful tools that is free in SEO. This this can indicate a lot. You can look at core vitals in Google Search Console, meaning is your site mobile and desktop friendly? How is it viewing the URLs? Do they see them as problematic, too slow? Is your contrast, not good enough for ADA compliance? Are your elements too close together on mobile? This can Search Console can tell you everything you need to know for free without buying an SEO tool. You can really find out a lot of information about how Google is viewing you. And if you're not ranking for something that you want to, you can dive in and you can find a lot of information in Google Search Console. And even like if you are performing really well and you're being favored for a ton of terms and queries, and they're all the keywords that you want to be shown for, really consider that before building a new website. I would say that's your golden nugget right here, because you might have an old website, but if Google likes it, it ain't broke, honey. There ain't nothing to fix. You leave it alone. That's Like, because it trusts you, and when you stop being favored, you know, it's time to make some changes. But just know that when you do a completely new website, that's something to consider. Look at how you're already being favored and for what terms, and make sure you incorporate that into your keyword strategy for your new website. Golden tip here. Okay. Um, Google Business Profile. This is like, it's actually like its own little mini website for you, built by Google. We've all seen them. You Google a service-based business, and then you see it pop up on the search engine results page, or SERPS. Um, has images of the business, their name, posts, products, hours, reviews. Yeah,
Yeah. And
that's
it's if you're optimizing it properly, it's going to show up in that really critical local 3-pack. So most of you are probably familiar with it, and if there's one thing you do really keep an eye on, it's probably your visibility in that particular area of the SERPs. But
oh yeah.
oh yeah, we
Sorry,
hear
I
from a
was
lot
gonna
of
say,
clients that are that's typically the easiest way, real quick, to that our clients like to check up and see how they're performing, is heading straight there. And
yeah.
there's there's nuance to it, but that's, at the end of the day, we all do want to make sure that we're ranking in those top spots.
Yep. It was formerly known as GMB, is what I was going to say. It popped into my head. So you might have heard GMB. Google My Business is, for a couple years now, it's been like Google Business Profile. GMB was easier to say, rolled off the tongue a bit better than GBP, but okay. GLSA, Google Local Service Ads, but this is commonly referred to as Google Guaranteed, right? They're kind of,
Yep.
people use them interchangeably.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's the ads that we've all seen there at the very top of our search results that you can click on, and it's a direct phone call, or sometimes you can message the company, taking over that top spot that we all used to see Google Ads hold for many moons. They've rolled it out slowly in different markets, but to gain your Google Guarantee badge, you have to allow them to run a background check on one of the owners of the company, and provide licensure and insurance, and it's based upon your local municipality. They make you provide whatever it is that your municipality uses to allow you to do business in that area. So once you've gone through that whole process and they've approved you, first of all, you get that pretty Google Guarantee badge that you can display proudly on your website. But then it allows you to run these ads if you so choose. We've talked about these ads in a lot of episodes. They are really the most cost effective ad medium at the moment for any contractor, if it's available in your space. In a lot of markets, we find it's really just a matter of everybody's fighting for that spot. But then there's some markets where it's a little bit slower, and it's your golden goose if you can if you can opt into that. So I could go down a really long pathway on this, but I think that basically summarizes it.
Yeah. No, I think that's perfect. And then last but not least, Google Ads,
Google Ads. Oh
not to be
goodness,
confused
Google
with
Ads.
GLSA or Google Guaranteed, not the same, different platform.
And not AdWords. It was AdWords for many years, and we were called out by a youngin one time and said they told us that we sounded like old ladies because we were calling it AdWords. And I will tell you how often I hear our colleagues still call it call it AdWords, and it makes me laugh. I'm like, so I'm not the only dinosaur out there still practicing in the industry. But nonetheless, Google Ads, AdWords, whatever you want to call it, it's the ads that we've all seen since the inception of Google. It's what made Google profitable for so many years. It's the ads that you can have a good amount of text, plus a bunch of links underneath them. You can bid on all kinds of different keywords. It's a great way to kind of like game the system and jump in line from an SEO perspective, as you're kind of like letting your SEO take off. It is, however, very cost prohibitive, and after COVID, the cost per clicks have only gone up from there. So it's an advertising medium you can consider, but we assure you that it is not the silver bullet that it might have been in the early 2000s.
Beautiful. All right, there you have it. Now you kind of recap on all the Google products, some other more technical terms that have to do with your website. But this concludes our episode of Tech Talk.
Tech Talk.
I want to punch myself. Tech Talk. You try saying it without sounding like Tech Talk. Oh my God. All right. That's it. If you found this helpful, maybe save this one. I think it's one of those ones, or just look at the show notes. We transcribe every episode. It's on our website. So you can just do a big fat control F to look for what you need. And hopefully you found it helpful.
Yeah. And if you're still here, thank you for listening.
Yeah. Thank you. Like, share, comment, follow. What do they say? God. All right. Until next time. Thank you.
That was today's trade secret. Thanks for listening.
Did you find this helpful? We're just getting started.
Subscribe and don't miss our next reveal.
Until next time.